Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is November 24th, 2023, and let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So let me know in the comment section if the audio quality is a little bit better. I have tweaked some of the settings. I got myself a little mount/arm, so hopefully the audio quality is better. Let me know. So without further ado, let's go to Crimea first. And in Crimea, there's one update in Dzhankoy. Apparently, the Ukrainian forces launched UAV attack in the city of Dzhankoy and destroyed a military airfield, or not an airfield, but a military facility, I should say, and also a few S-300 air defense systems. And this was reported by Azov. And there was also a video that emerged from that area showing explosions. So according to them, this is a UAV that hit a field camp in Dzhankoy. And Dzhankoy is very important for the Russians. Let's go back into the map. Dzhankoy sits at the really northern part of the Crimean Peninsula, and it's a key city for resupply. Resupplies in Zaporizhia and in Kherson. You can see that there's two direct railway connections, and there's also a lot of roads that drive through these narrow either bridges or narrow land bridges. One that goes through Armyansk that heads into Kherson, as you can see, and also one that heads into Melitopol. And so for the Russians, this is an extremely key city, and they have most likely a lot of command centers and other important military targets within here. In the grand scheme of things, what the Ukrainians are doing, I think they're just preparing for an eventual attack on the Crimean bridge. The goal is to absolutely destroy it. Ukraine has managed to partially either damage it or destroy it, but not enough for it to be permanently destroyed. That's what Ukraine needs to do, and hopefully this time they'll be able to do it in the next few months. It could be a series of different steps of attacks, but as long as the bridge is absolutely destroyed, the Ukrainians need to absolutely continue attacking it. So hopefully that's going to happen in the next few weeks, as I've reported on yesterday or 2 days ago. And so yeah, that's what I want to talk about first. And second of all, speaking of the Crimean bridge, apparently the Russians and the Chinese, according to the Washington Post, were talking, or are still talking, about building an underwater tunnel between essentially, Russia and Crimea. So basically replacing most likely the Kerch bridge. And I think this could be talks, direct talks, due to the fact that the Russians are not confident in holding this bridge. But either way, it's a stupid idea. I think everybody realizes that building a tunnel in an active war zone is stupidity, right? One simple bomb that will flood it, and that's it. Your entire billions of dollars that were invested are gone. So I see this as a fantasy, and if it's a true done deal, then good for the Russians. I mean, they're going to waste billions of dollars building something that's going to be destroyed very quickly. And don't underestimate the fact that this is a long project. We're not talking about, a couple meters of tunnels. We're talking about kilometers underwater. So this is a huge project, and that takes years and years, if not sometimes over a decade, to build such a project. So even if they were to start it today, they would probably still not be done by the end of this war. So I thought that was a funny article, and let me know, guys, what you think about this this project between China and Russia, if they broker and they agree to this deal. Additionally, let's go back into one more Russian fantasy, which is of Divka. All jokes aside, it is a difficult battleground for the Ukrainians. The Russians are doing everything possible to capture and encircle it and then capture Avdiivka. And that's where they're putting a lot of pressure right now at the top of Avdiivka and at the bottom. They're also doing a little bit of pressuring in the middle, as you can see, in the center of Avdiivka, but you can see that the Russians are really trying to break through here, through this vegetation and dense forest. I shouldn't say forest, but this line of trees that separates Stepove and Krasnohorivka. You can see that there is a lot of fighting for the past 2 weeks. This is what the Russians and the Ukrainians are fighting, where they're fighting. And so you can see that the Russians have not really managed to break through here. Last week, they were actually closer to Stepove. As you can see, they kind of entered parts, like the very beginning part of the village, and they were pushed out by the Ukrainian forces behind that vegetation or close to that vegetation. So the fighting is very difficult here. And I've seen the Ukrainian forces also use some of the Bradleys in action in this direction, deploying smoke and just hitting the Russians hiding behind the tree line. And I believe it was either somewhere around here or here. But the Ukrainians are doing like everything possible to push out the Russians and just hold this line for now and withstand until the winter, because this is where the Russians are seeing the most success. But also in the south, the Russians have really not been able to push the Ukrainians out as much as they wanted. In the last few days, as you can see, it's been pretty much the same. So the south is more successful for the Ukrainians. They've been really able to hold on to the Russians. But nonetheless, do not underestimate the Russians. They will continue throwing themselves like zombies, and they're going to go into that meat grinder. It's absolutely, you know, crazy to think that, but that's how they function, and don't underestimate that. So that's the update for Avdiivka. And again, in Kherson, the same situation as last time. A lot of activity. There's still a lot of silence and OPSEC, so I don't want to reveal exact details. Let the Ukrainian forces do what they need to do. And once we start seeing a lot of success, I'll start reporting more and more about them. But again, there's a lot of fighting along the shores of the left bank. The Ukrainian forces have entered some of the villages and other urban settlements. And so this is why, again, for the Russians, it's absolutely important, crucial to have this connection with Dzhankoy and Crimea to be able to efficiently move troops and supplies to Kherson. So the Ukrainians can really block that off. That's going to make their job a lot easier to really start pushing the Russians out as they lack more and more ammunition and weapons to be able to defend themselves. And of course, let's not forget that the FPV drones have been extremely efficient at fishing the Russians on the left bank. These drones have been so useful at pinpointing Russian positions, and they've really given a huge advantage to Ukraine because the Ukrainians can operate them with more skill, and they have been mass producing them compared to Russia. Russia also has a capacity of these to build these drones, the FPV drones and different other types of drones, but they don't mass produce them the way that Ukraine does, especially the tiny ones, the tiny little first-person view drones that can zip around 100 kilometers per hour. So this is a huge advantage that Ukraine still has, and it's really working hard on, because every single day there's different funds that people donate to build thousands of these drones per week. So that is a big advantage that Ukraine has, and its operators are some of the most skilled ones in the world. Truly, the Ukrainians are now the best drone flyers in the world. I think that everybody pretty much in Ukraine can fly a drone at this point. It seems like it. But yeah, that's the situation for Kherson, and I'll keep you guys again updated if there's any changes and positive results as well. Let's hope for the Ukrainian forces on the left bank of Kherson. So that's the map update. Now let's go back into the slides. Now I have two more slides I want to go over. So let's get to it. Yes, so now I want to talk about Canada, and thankfully Canada is also giving its fair share of help to Ukraine. And so now there's been an announcement that Canada is planning to give $1 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine by 2026. So that's a huge step up from what we've seen. Again, Canada has been training some Ukrainian soldiers through the Unifier mission. So that was about a $40 million investment, and also has allocated or is planning to allocate $500 million for cameras, for drones, firearms, pilot training, and tank maintenance. So key things that you don't often think about when you think about military assistance. It's also the training, cameras, little things also do matter. But let's also talk about the fact that the previous governments, it's not only the current one, have been absolutely not investing into the Canadian Armed Forces. For the last few decades, the Canadian Armed Forces have not been doing well. They have been taking too long for procurement processes, a lot of rusty jet fighters or malfunctioning jet fighters, rusty vessels. And so hopefully the current government or the future governments will start reinvesting back into the Canadian military and reinforcing it so it is worthy of its name, because Canada is a great military power, and I believe it because in World War II and World War I, there were some of the best soldiers And even afterwards in Afghanistan, Canadians do care about their military. So I think that it's also important that Canada reinvests into its military, because it's been seriously lacking for the last few decades, the very least since the early 2000s. And there really needs to be a bigger budget for our veterans, the Canadian forces. So hopefully that also will come into play eventually. Lastly, I want to talk about a cyber operation that was done by the Ukrainian intelligence at the Rosaviatsia, so essentially some, I believe, like a Russian institution for airplanes. And they have found out that essentially it's a total disaster for Russian aviation. As you can see, they found out that in January 2023, there were 185 air accidents that were registered in Russian civil aviation. So I'm not sure if it's just in the month of January. That would be crazy. Also, in the first 9 months of 2023, 150 cases of aircraft malfunctions were documented in Russia. In the same period in 2022, 50 such incidents were recorded. So basically, there was an increase of danger in 3 times. So basically, from 50 to 150 cases of aircraft malfunction. That's a big deal. Essentially, the aggressor state of Russia has serious difficulties with maintenance of high-flying aircraft due to the lack of capacity and specialists. Moscow is trying to reorient aircraft maintenance to Iran, where, of course, some of this work is carried out artisanally without appropriate certification. So there's even more findings that they found out, so you guys can find it on Google if you search this cyber operation that was conducted today or yesterday. But it's crazy to think that the Russian civilians and pilots are willing to fly these planes. It's sheer suicide. And especially next few months / years, forget about flying a Russian airplane. That thing is, 50% going to either give your death or a safe landing or a semi-safe landing. So every month we get closer and closer to seeing most likely regular fatal airplane crashes in Russia, which is, it would be brutal to see, but that's what happens when Russia doesn't play by the international rules and starts stealing some of these planes from the lenders. And also the fact that while Russia uses some of these components as well to be able to also rebuild its military, Air Force, and also its jet fighters. So we cannot absolutely give anything to Russia in terms of key components for aircraft, because they're going to utilize it to rebuild its military as well, its Air Force. And so yeah, let me know what you guys think about this situation. And thank you again for supporting my channel. I really appreciate it. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and Slava Ukraini.